The first thing that's created a lot of buzz here in Washington and throughout the country, this book from Scott McClellan. I want to read the excerpt from that book that seems to be so controversial here. He said, "I had unknowingly passed along false information, and 5 of the highest-ranking officials in the administration were involved in my doing so. Rove, Libby, the vice president, the president's chief of staff, and the president himself." Jack, let's start with you. With a bombshell accusation like this, what does it say about the administration?
Well, a couple of things occur to me. The first one is whoever's doing the PR for McClellan's book ought to get a raise, because he's doing a masterful job of creating buzz and interest in a book that won't even be out till next April. The second thing is, it doesn't really seem to me like it's breaking news that the administration, the White House, may have misled one of their own about something. After all, they've been lying to the rest of the country about a whole bunch of stuff for the better part of 6.5 years. You remember when the story broke about the CIA agent and President Bush said, "I will fire anybody in the White House who was involved in compromising the identity of a CIA agent." Well, that was a lie, wasn't it? Because Karl, Rove, and Scooter Libby and some of those folks, they were up to their armpits in the compromising of Valerie Plame's identity. So the president changed, and he said, well, I will fire anybody who's convicted of committing a crime in conjunction with the outing of a CIA. So, I mean, that place has turned into an oil slick down there a long time ago, and I don't believe a whole much of anything that comes out of there these days.
John, I know you're itching to jump in here, obviously. How much of what we understand, what McClellan is saying, you were there when all of this was unfolding here, when he says the president was involved, what is your understanding of what he's trying to say?
Well, I think first and foremost, he might want to steal Jack's title and rename his book a little bit. It got ugly in there, inside the White House. Look, you know, Scott feels betrayed. There's no question about that. He has said that privately in conversations since he found out what had happened. The key question now is, obviously, there's that quote that makes everyone say, whoa, the president was involved in it. His publisher is out today saying Scott is not saying the president was lying. What Scott seems to be saying is that he thinks the president was ill-informed or misinformed as well. So there are questions unanswered here. The principal one, in my view, is what was the vice president's role? We understand that Karl Rove and Scooter Libby told Scott McClellan something that was not true, and he feels his credibility was shot, and he feels betrayed by it. The bigger question is, what did the vice president know? And if the president didn't lie but passed on information to Scott McClellan that turned out not to be true, who told the president that information, and what is being done about that? So I would love to read the full chapter, not just the brief excerpt.
And Gloria, how's this going to be received by the White House? Who's the potential fall guy in all of this?
Well, they're not happy, obviously, because nobody wants to see the president accused of lying. And I think the key word to look at here, which everybody seems to be throwing around, is knowingly. I did not knowingly tell somebody a falsehood. If the president actually told Scott McClellan that nobody in the White House had leaked Valerie Plame's name, that is probably what the president was told. I agree with John. The question is, who told the president that? Was it the vice president? And we know how close the vice president was to Scooter Libby. And did Karl Rove technically leak Valerie Plame's name, or did he say to the Time correspondent, when the Time correspondent raised it, said, yeah, I heard that. Is that technically leaking her name? Maybe not. So I think this whole thing is a bunch of technicalities right now. And by the way, Jack, I agree with you, Jack, this is a big publicity stunt because really nobody cares anymore.
Well, I care, and I'll tell you why I care. George Bush is the President of the United States, and this idea that he was somehow victimized by his own people, he didn't know what was going on. He's the President. This was a huge
But what
story
if he's lied
at the
to,
time.
Jack? What if somebody lies to the President? What are you going to do?
Excuse me. The buck stops at the Oval Office. He's in charge. It's up to him to find out who's telling the truth and who isn't. It's up to him to tell the American people what went on in his White House.
I think we'll hear that in his memoir.
It's his White House.
I think when he writes his memour, maybe we'll get to the bottom of it.
No, I'd like to hear it now. There might still be time to impeach him.
I would too. I'd like to hear it.
Should we wait for the memoirs? Does anybody believe the president should jump in now for the next 14 months?
How about the American public be told what the Chief Executive Office of the United States government is up to? How about if we were told the truth? Wouldn't that be a switch?
Suzanne, as you know, the president doesn't like these behind-the-curtain books being written about his administration, and this is, in fact, a very rare thing for someone who was in the inner circle to write a behind-the-scenes look inside the White House that will be at least somewhat critical of the administration. But the president will get asked about it. He'll get asked about it at the next news conference. He'll get asked about it when the book comes out. Look, Scott McClellan is a good man who was a loyal soldier to this president. He was betrayed, and he wants to clear his name, and I'm looking forward to reading the book.
Okay, well, we'll pick up this conversation.